Coworker accused me of fathering his child despite knowing I'm gay and engaged, leading to a dramatic, unwanted paternity test showdown. I'm a 23-year-old guy who's been working at the same factory since I was 19, and in those 4 years, I became good friends with one of my coworkers, Robert, who's 32. Robert and I hit it off pretty fast, and over the years, we got to know each other well. Robert has always been proud of his 4 boys, all of them practically carbon copies of him. Picture it, bleach blonde, straight hair, skin without a single freckle, and I swear these kids look sun-kissed straight from the womb. His wife, Danielle, is his high school sweetheart, and she's just the opposite, a riot of tight, red curls, covered in freckles, and she burns walking past a lamp. The running joke was always wondering if Danielle's coloring would ever finally make it into a kid. Then came Chelsea, their 5th child and first daughter, now 2 months old. The first time I met her, she was just 2 weeks old, and honestly, I had to catch my breath. I'm a fellow redhead, long, curly hair myself, and this baby had a head of red hair already working up a curl. I couldn't help but exclaim, it finally happened. The red is alive. I was being over the top on purpose, just dramatic and funny. Robert smirked and said, "Yeah, don't bank on that staying. My genes are strong after all." I brushed it off as a weird joke, but he wouldn't let up. The whole visit he just kept harping on how convinced he was that his genes would win out, that this red hair was temporary. Weeks went by, Chelsea hit 5 weeks, and things started getting stranger. Day in and day out, as soon as I clocked in, Robert would corner me to complain about how he didn't see himself in Chelsea, how she felt so stranger to him, and how sometimes he felt like he was looking at someone else's kid. It was only ever me he came to with this, too, like I'd somehow have the answers. After 5 days in a row of this, I tried explaining basic genetics, how traits skip generations, how you can't just expect all your kids to look like you. Didn't help. 3 days ago, Robert came into work already looking for a fight. He snapped at a coworker, and our friend Jesse asked what the hell was up with him. Robert just exploded. He yelled that he knows Chelsea isn't his, that Danielle was cheating and refusing to admit it, and that he knew exactly who she was with. Then he turned on me, pointed and shouted, demanding I get my ass outside. I asked why, and he freaked out, screaming that I'd been trying to kiss ass to avoid a beatdown. The whole thing was so absurd. I'm gay, engaged to a man, my car's blindingly covered in pride stickers, and anyone who's seen me outside work knows I'm not remotely in the closet. I just burst out laughing at how off the rails he'd gone, and I wasn't alone in thinking he'd lost it. I told him, right to his face, that Chelsea is half Danielle, not some robot incubator for his genes. I even asked him why he was so obsessed with all his kids needing to be photocopies of himself. He just kept demanding I get up so he could drag me outside to fight. I wasn't about to brawl in the parking lot. I asked if he was trying to get himself fired, and he just kept insisting I take a paternity test. I stared at him, incredulous. He was dead serious, citing the time I spend with Danielle. Sure, Danielle and I hang out, she's part of this girlfriend group I'm in, 5 of us, all about artsy stuff and just hanging out. Nothing romantic or weird. I told Robert to test himself if he was so desperate. He argued he would never waste money on a test when he knows the truth. So now I'm expected to pay for my own paternity test to disprove something so outlandish, all while saying nothing? It was laughable. The conversation only ended because our shift manager walked in. I texted Danielle right away and told her everything that had just happened. The next day was my day off and I slept in, phone on silent. When I woke up, my fiancé Elliot was just getting off the phone, telling me I should check mine ASAP. I had been bombarded with dozens of messages, missed calls, threatening voicemails from Robert. Apparently, Danielle kicked him out of the house, and in a fit of whatever you'd call it, Robert actually dug through her phone to get Elliot's number and call him with his version of events. Elliot was just baffled, since I'd told him everything already, and Danielle had texted me herself to apologize for her husband's behavior and let me know they were getting a paternity test, that she was filing for divorce, and she had no idea what had possessed him. Elliot finds the whole thing darkly hilarious, that Robert's managed to burn down his marriage over this level of insecurity. But Robert, ever stubborn, texted me again today while I was getting ready for work, now saying he'd front the money for the test and that when the results come back, he'd F me up in court for what I did, how I'd ruined not only his life but everyone in their family's lives too. Idiots even telling people around work that I'm the real dad. I told him I'd take the test, but that when the results were in, he might as well quit his job and disappear, because it's going to be absolutely humiliating when I wave the paperwork proving I'm not the dad and he has to explain to everyone, even his own kids, how ridiculous he's been. Friends at work have been cold towards me now. They say they're sure I'm not the dad, but I'm trash for going straight to Danielle and stirring up drama, getting him kicked out and forced to sleep in his truck. I don't see how it's my fault he went nuclear and started accusing me, expecting me to pay for everything and keep my mouth shut. Now this whole thing is all over Facebook. Robert's family is publicly trashing Danielle, and I'm getting mocked for being the reverse beard, as if a gay man would seduce a woman just to cover for himself. Elliot's family is even getting suspicious, using the logic they wouldn't be this sure without proof. Thankfully, my own family is 100% on my side and knows I've got as much interest in women as I do in living on the sun. Even if I did, cheating isn't in my nature. As soon as the test is done, We're aiming for Monday or Tuesday. I'll be waving those results like a victory flag. This whole thing feels like a ridiculous red-headed soap opera, and I'm ready for the credits to roll. Update 1. The paternity test is officially scheduled for this Thursday, but when I called to confirm, the woman on the other end explained there'd been some delays. Instead of 3 to 4 business days, it was looking more like 5 to 7. I felt like those extra days stretched out in front of me, impossibly long. Work hasn't been much better. The atmosphere among my coworkers shifted so suddenly, I felt like I'd stepped into a parallel universe. I took it upon myself to ask around. Sometimes people approached me, sometimes I approached them, because I needed to understand how everything flipped so fast when we'd all been friends for years. Turns out, I'd completely misread Robert. He hadn't just been venting his paranoid suspicions about Danielle to me alone, he was probing, fishing for something, gauging my every word, as if he was hunting for a confession I couldn't give. What really threw me was learning these suspicions had been festering for almost 2 years, dating back to when I started showing up more regularly for girlfriend nights. Robert, it seems, was suspicious of me because I supposedly didn't act gay enough. Absurd, right? There's no manual for this. This man has literally seen me in a full-body unicorn onesie, face mask on, sitting with his wife and the others as they did my hair. If I were allowed to wear nail polish, fake lashes, or jewelry to work, I absolutely would. Safety and sanitation rules forbid it, but if he needed a stereotype to reassure him, I could have given him one. A few coworkers filled in the blanks for me. When Danielle got pregnant with Chelsea, Robert started making awkward jokes about how the baby might turn out a redhead because she spent so much time with me. At first, it seemed harmless, but over time he became sincere. He'd really convinced himself something was happening. Friends told him he was being paranoid, pointing out he had 3 large dogs who loved to rumple the bed, but Robert would claim he came home to the sheets looking like evidence. He even said he'd caught Danielle and me kissing, which is laughable, since I have a personal thing about not kissing anyone but Elliot, not even my family. Never once did he confront us about any of it, just nurse this imagined narrative in silence, but he didn't just let it fester. He started thinking grander, darker thoughts, that our friendship was so obviously an affair he received dozens of messages from friends asking whether he and Danielle were divorcing because of us. Frankly, I don't buy that for 1 second. Robert is confrontational to a fault. If he thought something was real, he'd take action, not play the long game. Then came the revelation that chills me. When his obsessive vigilance produced no evidence, Robert installed cameras throughout the house. No one bothered to tell me. Danielle didn't say a word. And these weren't just obvious security cameras in the garage or on the back door or the Ring doorbell, those I knew about. These were tiny, discreetly nestled in bookshelves around the living area, bedroom, kitchen, and dining room. I'm not usually shy about the obvious cameras, I've even waved and made faces at them. But this? This was a violation. We're talking about deeply personal conversations among a tight group of friends, trauma, marriage troubles, fertility struggles, and all the private miseries that come with trusting others. Sometimes even Elliot, my own partner, was kept intentionally in the dark. I didn't share what wasn't mine to share. I know what it's like to have a secret forced into the open. When my cousin outed me to our family, despite their liberal values, I was terrified. And I know that our friends, unlike me, don't all enjoy families ready to accept the truth. Determined to get the truth, I reached out to Danielle. When I confronted her, she called me in tears, confirming my worst suspicions. Robert put those cameras everywhere except the bedroom for the express purpose of catching us in some betrayal, obsessed over audio feeds she doesn't even have access to herself. They link straight to an app on his phone, only he can listen in. She told me that before she got pregnant, Robert started confronting her, all the time, about her friendship with me. He didn't trust her around other men, not even her own relatives, and expected her to prove her loyalty by giving him every password, let him mirror her text messages, grant him total surveillance over her digital life. Even that wasn't enough. When she refused to drop our friendship, especially given how many sisters he has who aren't real sisters, he escalated, convinced himself we were having an affair, and set up the cameras. Danielle confessed she hadn't warned me because she was scared. She needed the stability, she couldn't afford the house, the kids, life itself, on her own, especially after she got pregnant again. She worried if I knew, I'd confront Robert, he'd blow up and leave, and she'd lose everything. I asked her if he'd always doubted Chelsea was his, and she admitted he toggled wildly between acceptance and certainty she'd cheated. Turns out, Robert didn't go out for guys' nights so much as escape to a buddy's house and watch us on those cameras, listening and cataloging what we said. Sometimes the girls would vent about their marriages or personal trauma under the impression it was private, but now I knew the truth. He'd been listening the whole time, possibly saving videos. Danielle suspected as much because he'd referenced things said the night before, make fun of us, try to start fights over our conversations. I couldn't believe she'd let this go on without so much as a warning. She could have told us when we were out, if not at her home. There were plenty of times she could have explained what was happening. The other women in our group unveiled wounds and fears under the assumption that their secrets were safe. Now, to realize those confessions might be floating around, saved by a man ready to use them as blackmail or gossip, left me reeling. I let Danielle know, bluntly, that none of us were airing our darkest pain for his entertainment, amusement, or ammunition. If any of those recordings ever got out, there's no telling what devastation might follow. She told me, almost apologetically, that she's taken the cameras down for now, at least until we get the paternity results. I had to ask, was she actually thinking of reconciling, just carrying on as if the lies and humiliation never happened if the test proved Chelsea was really his? And though she tried to answer, her voice broke, leaving us both haunted by what came next. Everything about this situation has become a complete circus, and somehow, I've ended up in the middle of it. When Danielle told me about her husband's surveillance setup, I felt like I was talking to an actively thickening wall. She said he'd agreed to couples counseling if the privacy breach actually happened, and, supposedly, he would make sure everyone knew about the cameras. I kept pressing her, pointing out how he's managed to cut her off from her friends. She literally can't talk to anyone about her marriage without fear, because of the constant surveillance. Not just in her own home, where she doesn't even have access to the footage, but in her messages and texts as well. Still, she insisted things would change, but I dropped it for the moment, deciding we'd cross that bridge in a week or so. But I couldn't let her off the hook that easily. I told her straight up, she needed to come clean to the others about him possibly having videos on his phone of all of them, dangerous, private videos none of them ever consented to. She tried to defend him, said he'd never post them, that he wasn't that kind of man. I snapped back at her, this is the same man who tried to drag me outside to fight, who posted everywhere about what a wh she supposedly is, who trashed my name, who's still actively slandering us and roping his whole family into it. They're all feeding into his paranoid, delusional stories and making up even crazier accusations. We went back and forth for what felt like hours, me furious at her for lying about knowing this was a possibility, both of us hanging up again and again just to cool off. I vented to Elliot in the process, trying to wrap my mind around how Danielle could hide something so massive from us. Finally, after all the blow-ups, she agreed to tell them, the others who might be victims of this surveillance mess. And the backlash? It was instant and brutal. 2 of them blocked Danielle on every platform, and they started reaching out to me, panicked, telling me they just can't feel safe around her anymore, not after this. The 3rd friend is torn. She doesn't want Danielle even more isolated than she already is, but she's terrified those videos will end up everywhere, either posted online or sent to their families for maximum damage. That fear is personal, too. She once confided in Danielle about an abortion that her extremely pro-life family knows nothing about. If he exposed that out of petty revenge, it could get her disowned. I understand Danielle, on some level. I know what it's like to be trapped in a relationship with an abuser. The need to have someone validate your experience can be so blinding, you can't see how dangerous the whole situation is. But I don't understand why I had to be the one to drag the truth out of her. Why didn't she immediately tell us, knowing how much was at stake? What if he decided to blow everything up and send those videos around Facebook, to partners and families? What if something unspeakable happened, and we only found out after it was too late? Right now, this is just a giant mess. I need a drink, even though, of course, it's only effing Tuesday. Update 2. Thursday came and went like a blur. The paternity test was finally done, just a simple cheek swab that took all of 2 minutes but felt like it carried the weight of the entire mess we're all drowning in. Robert showed up looking like he hadn't slept in days, which honestly, he probably hadn't. His truck's been parked outside the factory most nights this week. I almost felt bad for him until he started his usual routine of glaring at me like I'd personally destroyed his life. The lab tech was professional, but I could tell she was trying not to react to the obvious tension between us. Robert kept muttering under his breath about how this was all just a formality, how he already knew what the results would show. I wanted to tell him that if he was so certain, maybe he should have thought twice before blowing up his entire life, but I kept my mouth shut. 5 to 7 business days suddenly felt like an eternity, but here's where things get really twisted, and I'm still processing this myself. Yesterday, I got a call from Jessie, our mutual friend from work. She was practically whispering, asking if I could meet her for coffee after our shift. Something in her voice made my stomach drop, but I agreed. What she told me at that dingy 24-hour diner still has me reeling. Apparently, Robert's been talking. A lot. And not just the usual ranting about me and Danielle. Jessie said he's been showing people something on his phone, video clips, short ones, maybe 30 seconds each. She wouldn't tell me exactly what was in them, but from the way she kept avoiding eye contact, I knew it was bad. He's not just watching you guys hang out, she finally said, stirring her coffee nervously. He's been editing things. Taking conversations out of context, cutting clips together to make it look like. She trailed off, but I got the picture. My blood ran cold. Those cameras weren't just for his paranoid surveillance, he'd been building a case, manufacturing evidence of an affair that never happened. And now he was shopping it around to anyone who'd listen, trying to get ahead of the paternity results that would inevitably prove him wrong. I immediately called Danielle, my hands shaking as I dialed. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting for bad news. When I told her what Jessie had said, she went completely silent for almost a full minute. Danielle? Are you there? He took my laptop, she whispered finally. Yesterday. Said he needed it for work stuff, but I know he doesn't need it for anything. God, what if he's been editing more than just the camera footage? What if he's been going through everything? Old photos, messages, anything he can twist. That's when she dropped the real bombshell. Turns out, Robert's been in contact with Elliot's ex-boyfriend, Marcus. Yeah, the same Marcus who cheated on Elliot 2 years ago and has been bitter about our relationship ever since. Apparently, Robert tracked him down on social media, convinced him I was some kind of master manipulator who'd stolen Elliot away and was now destroying marriages for fun. Marcus, being the vindictive piece of work he is, has been feeding Robert stories about my history of seducing straight men, complete fiction, but Robert was eating it up. Even worse, Marcus supposedly has screenshots of old texts between me and Elliot from when we first started dating, back when Elliot was still figuring himself out and sometimes made comments that could be taken out of context if you really wanted to paint me as predatory. The whole thing is so insane I can barely wrap my head around it. Robert's created this elaborate conspiracy theory where I'm some kind of criminal mastermind, seducing both straight women and confused gay men for what exactly? The thrill? The drama? It makes no sense, but when you're desperate to avoid admitting you've destroyed your own marriage over nothing, I guess any story will do. Elliot's been getting weird looks at his job too. Someone apparently sent his boss an anonymous message asking if they were aware of the situation with his partner. Nothing came of it, but the fact that this is spreading beyond our immediate circle has us both on edge. The worst part? I found out from another coworker that Robert's been telling people he has video proof of me admitting to the affair. Which is impossible, because it never happened, but apparently he's got some clip of me laughing and saying something about how Robert would kill me if he knew, except I was talking about borrowing his Netflix password, not sleeping with his wife. Danielle's completely falling apart. She called me sobbing at 2 a.m. last night, saying she doesn't know who to trust anymore. Even her own mother is starting to question her story after Robert showed up at her house with his evidence. The fact that her own family is wavering is destroying her. And the friends from our group? 2 of them are still radio silent, but the third one, Maya, called me yesterday with news that made my stomach drop. Apparently, Robert reached out to her directly, claiming he had footage of her talking about her abortion and threatening to send it to her family unless she told the truth about what really happened between me and Danielle during our hangouts. Maya's terrified. She's been having panic attacks, convinced her ultra-religious parents are going to find out and disown her. She begged me to just confess to something, anything, to make Robert back off. I had to explain to her that giving in to blackmail never works, he'll just escalate. I'm supposed to hear back about the test results by Wednesday. Part of me can't wait to shove the negative results in Robert's face, but another part of me is terrified that even concrete proof won't be enough to stop this runaway train. He's so invested in this fantasy now that I'm worried he'll just claim the test was faked or that I somehow switched the samples. Elliot keeps telling me this will all blow over once the truth comes out, but I'm not so sure anymore. Robert's not just wrong, he's dangerous. And I'm starting to think this was never really about Chelsea at all. This was about a man who couldn't handle his wife having any life outside of him, and I just happened to be the convenient target. 3 more days until we hopefully get some answers. I just hope there's something left to salvage when this is all over. Update 3, Wednesday morning, 7:43 a.m. I was getting ready for work when my phone rang, unknown number. Something told me to answer it anyway. Is this about the paternity test? I asked before whoever it was could even speak. Results are in, came the clipped voice of the lab technician. Can you come in this morning to review them? My hands were shaking as I called in sick to work. Elliot offered to come with me, but honestly, I needed to face this alone first. When I got to the lab, Robert was already there in the waiting room, looking like he'd been awake for days straight. He wouldn't even make eye contact with me. They called us both back, and the technician, a middle-aged woman who clearly dealt with this kind of drama regularly, handed us each a sealed envelope. Mr. Thompson, she said, looking at Robert, you were excluded as the biological father. Then she turned to me. And sir, you are also excluded as the biological father. The silence in that room was deafening. Robert just stared at the paper, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and what looked like dawning horror. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. That's impossible, he whispered. She had to have. If it's not him, then who? I left him there, still muttering to himself. But as I walked to my car, my phone was already buzzing. Danielle, calling me in tears. I need to tell you something, she sobbed. Something I should have told you weeks ago. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in her car in an empty parking lot, and she was falling apart in front of me. There was someone else, she whispered, barely audible. Last year, when Robert was working those double shifts and barely coming home. I was so lonely, and he was always accusing me anyway, and I made a terrible mistake. My blood ran cold. Danielle. It was only 3 times. Maybe 4. I ended it as soon as I found out I was pregnant because I knew there was a chance. She was hyperventilating now. I tried to convince myself it was Robert's because the timing could have worked, and Chelsea looks like me, and I wanted it to be as so badly. Who was it? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. Marcus. The world stopped. Marcus? As in Elliot's ex Marcus? She nodded miserably. He was working at the grocery store where I shop, and he was always so friendly, asking about you and Elliot. He said he was happy for you both, that he'd moved on. We started talking more, and he'd text me sometimes, just friendly stuff. Then one day when I was having a really bad fight with Robert about his paranoia, Marcus offered to listen. We met for coffee, and it just escalated. I felt sick. This whole time, Marcus had been feeding Robert lies about me while knowing damn well he was Chelsea's actual father. He'd been playing both sides, stirring up chaos and probably enjoying every second of it. Does Marcus know? I asked. I told him I was pregnant, but I said it was Robert's. He never questioned it. She paused, wiping her nose. But now? God, what if he figures it out? What if he demands custody or tells everyone or? We need to tell Robert, I said, though the words felt like poison in my mouth. Are you insane? He'll kill me. Maybe literally. But we both knew this couldn't stay hidden. Not with Robert still convinced I was the father and escalating his harassment campaign. Not with those videos still floating around. Not with Marcus still out there, potentially putting two and two together. I drove home in a daze, but when I walked through the door, Elliot was pacing the living room with his phone pressed to his ear. No, Mom, he's not cheating. No, the baby isn't his. The test literally just proved it. He looked up when he saw me, and I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. I'll call you back. Your family? I asked. My aunt saw something on Facebook. Apparently Robert's posted the paternity test results, but he's spinning it like we somehow faked them. He's saying you and I are both in on some elaborate scheme to hide the truth. Elliot sat down heavily on our couch, and there's something else. Marcus called me. My stomach dropped. What did he say? He wanted to warn me that you've been acting strange lately, that maybe I should be worried about your mental state. Said he was concerned about me being in a relationship with someone so unstable. Elliot looked at me carefully. But here's the weird part, he kept asking specific questions about when we started dating, about whether I remembered you mentioning Danielle early in our relationship. It felt like he was fishing for something. I told Elliot everything Danielle had confessed. Watching his face change as he processed that his toxic ex was not only the real father of Chelsea but had been manipulating this entire situation was almost as painful as living through it. He's been playing chess while the rest of us were playing checkers, Elliot said quietly. Question is, what's his endgame? We got our answer 2 hours later when Danielle called, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. He knows, she gasped. Marcus knows about Chelsea. He's at my door right now, demanding to see her. He says if I don't let him in, he's going to tell Robert everything and claim that I've been lying about you to protect him. I could hear shouting in the background, Marcus's voice, angry and demanding. Then Robert's voice too, getting louder. Wait, Robert's there? Marcus called him. Told him he had new information about who Chelsea's real father is. They're both here, and I don't know what to do. Robert's screaming at Marcus, Marcus is screaming at me, and the neighbors are starting to come outside. The line went quiet for a moment, then I heard a crash, something breaking. Danielle? Danielle? I have to go, she whispered. Someone's calling the police. The line went dead. Elliot and I looked at each other, both thinking the same thing. This was about to get so much worse.